Let's talk about developing characters. This is something that you may have heard of if you've ever spoken to an agent or a publisher and they've come back with you with this weird question or this weird advice. Where are the characters? What about the characters? Who are the main characters here? How are you going to develop the characters? As an academic, you've probably thought, what a strange question. I'm not in the business of writing characters and screenplays and plots and movies. I'm trying to tell you a story about something. Well, guess what? It's very hard to tell a story without characters. This is a huge topic, and we address this often in our workshops, in our retreats. We do whole sessions on this. Some of you have already heard a lot of kind of my take on how to develop characters as an academic writing for the first time for trade. But I want you to hear today from Clive. So again, my name is John Gazvinian. If you're not familiar with us already, check us out. Scholars to Storytellers, where we help senior academics in the humanities and social sciences reach wider audiences, publish for trade, get an agent, and to do all of that in 9 months or less. If you're interested in our coaching programs, just check us out, www.scholarstostorytellers.com. The link is also in the caption to this video. So, Clive, welcome back.
Good to be with you.
This is a huge topic. We've spent a lot of time on this, but very briefly, what is your philosophy on character development? Specifically, if you're an academic, you're a historian, you're a psychologist, a sociologist, an anthropologist, God forbid, a political scientist who is not in the business, typically of crafting characters. How do you approach this in your writing, or how
Yeah,
should you?
it is a bit of a monster, this subject. I'm not quite sure. I'm not even sure I'm in any position to opine on it in the first place, let alone that we might even get halfway to covering it. But I think part of the conversation about characters it is if you're talking to an agent and they're asking you for more character development, I think the unsaid perhaps part of that conversation is about the style of your writing that they don't find is quite right for the trade audience yet. Because I think what character is intended to replace is argument. If and a lot of academics start with argument. You know, the process of rationalizing what I believe, what I want to prove. I marshal my evidence. I lay it out in front of you, and I invite you to agree with me. Um, the character is a sort of, it's not just an adornment to that, but it's almost an alternate way of making a case. And it does it through essentially emotional attachment. So what you're being asked to do is to give representations of the points of that argument um, in the form of people, and to make uh, the path that you want the reader to believe in full of sympathetic people, and the path that you don't want them to go down full of less sympathetic people. I mean, that's the game. So that they feel an attachment, but not necessarily a logical attachment to the outcome. So, choosing who those people are that kind of accomplish that is very tricky. And then writing about character is also, it's a whole different skill set in many ways. But that, I think, if you're being asked for more characterization, I think, hear the unsaid criticism behind that, because I suspect it's there.
You're being told your writing is boring, basically. It's a very nice way of
Well, or just too sort of rigid and argumentative, and lacking these other, emotional spaces.
I mean, it's what you're saying is strikingly similar to the answer I give, and the same approach I take to this exact topic in our workshops. I always say to people, when you read a great novel, there's no visible argument there. But by the time you get to the end of it, you've identified with certain characters. Others have become more complex to you over time. You've started to think about a whole universe of people and places in a way that was different from when you picked up that novel. And at no point has the novelist said, in this chapter, I will demonstrate my theoretical framework is, chapter 3 will show. You've just let the story unfold through characters. And I always say to people, you can still make the same arguments you want to make. It's not that when you're being asked to do storytelling or plot or character development, that somehow you're just throwing argument out the window, you're throwing your scholarship out the window. Far from it. You're actually presenting your arguments just in a different form. You're embedding them in a story, and you're letting readers draw their own conclusions. And you're right. It's exactly It's exactly right. You're letting them do that on a more kind of emotional register, rather than a sort of, you know, here's one point, here's another point, here are three sub points to my last point kind of approach, which I think is a much more human way of writing and reading and receiving information.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely more human. The other thing is, I think there's an implied criticism of some academic language, which is perhaps unintentionally elitist or at least exclusionary. It gets very technical. Even you may not think that your academic language is technical, but it is. Those books are not easy to read for the average reader, whereas people are generally interested in people. So it's absolutely right. The role of the characters is not to dumb down the thought; it's to embody as much complex thought as you have, going into this project. And the aphorism that publishers and I guess agents, editors certainly use for the general trade. It's a cliche, but like all cliches, it has a bit of truth in it. Is show, don't tell.
Yeah.
So, telling is arguing, telling is wagging your finger and saying, I'm going to prove to you that you must go along with what I'm telling you. Showing people doing things invites the reader to agree. So you could say that all character is manipulation. You could say that, and to some extent it is. And I don't think that good writers would really argue with that. They might say, yeah, it's manipulation, but it's done from a position of empathy. It's done from a position of love, and it's designed to make more human and more layered and more complicated, something that shouldn't be reduced to a simple logical argument. That simple logical arguments don't actually deliver. We could all have a view about the behavior of Vladimir Putin as a geopolitical strategist, but what we're actually more interested in is what makes Vladimir Putin, as a human being. And the character piece there is probably harder to get at, harder to imagine, harder to realize than the geopolitics. So,
Ultimately,
to your
yeah.
point, writing character well is tough. It's
Yeah.
a hard ask, and a real skill. And that's why it's probably the subject of a much longer conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you said something at the very beginning of that I really liked, and I actually want to underscore because I hope people heard it, and I hope I'm quoting you correctly. But the role of the role of the character is not to dumb down the argument; it's to embody the argument. I really like that. So if you're listening to this, I would underline that. I think that's a great quote, and I think it really sums up what the purpose of character development actually is. One question that often comes up, and then we'll just stop here. I find every time I talk to groups of academics in the humanities and social sciences, particularly social scientists, about character development and the importance of it, the question that I get from someone is, well, how do we do that without exploiting our subjects? There's a long history of a certain kind of anthropology or sociology that I don't want to do. I don't want to go in there and just like take, take in this kind of extractive way from the people that have trusted me and that are talking to me and kind of turn them into kind of, cute, interesting kind of characters. That's a very one-sided and extractive kind of relationship that I want to, exploitative relationship that I want to avoid. How do I do that? How do I respect the people that I'm actually dealing with? Because these are not fictional characters after all. They're people.
Yeah, it's a different task writing about characters that you have interviewed and that than writing about characters who are dead or historical. I mean, it's related, but it's different. So, what I would say is, firstly, that the scruples over how you treat your subjects, your interview subjects, are of course admirable, but you are likely to feel them much more than anybody out there feels them. And that in general, my personal feeling about this, whether it's a journalist or an academic who is writing from their own research, is that the most important thing to the reader here is that you are honest about the research, that somewhere you say, where did this material come from? How did you get it? How are you in a position to write about such and such a person? And that can be either embodied in the main part of the book, or it can be in the notes, or it can be in the acknowledgements, or a preface, or whatever it is. But I think a little honesty about where the material comes from is really important. and actually very liberating. Once you've told people how you come to be in a position to write about such and such a person, you can then just get on and write about them. You know, you've explained the journey to getting the interview or knowing the person or spending time with them, whatever it is. You've done it once. You don't have to keep doing it. You can then just talk about them as a character. So get your caveats out of the way early. Put them in the book somewhere where they don't feel obtrusive, but they feel appropriate, and then just write.
Yeah, I mean, honesty gets you a long way. Yeah, I think that's
It
always
really
good
does.
advice. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Well, look, this is a absolutely massive topic, and if you are interested, but it's a very important topic, and if you're interested in character development, it's an area that, quite honestly, I see academics struggle with a lot, but it's very, very important as you make the transition to trade. If you want to make if you're serious about making the transition to writing for trade. It is a topic we're going to be covering. Clive and I are both going to be covering in depth during the retreats that we're doing this year. So if you're watching this video sometime in the beginning of 2026, you should know that we have 3 retreats coming up this year, each of which will cover in depth things like character development, but also all kinds of other things like finding an agent and how to write a proposal and all those useful nuts and bolts tricks and tips as well. We have one retreat in February in Santa Cruz, which is almost sold out at this point. Another one in June in Minnesota, and another one in November in Texas. So hope to see you at one of those, and hope to see you again soon as well, Clive. Thanks for the conversation.
Bye bye.
All right.